Hello there, welcome to my channel. This is the first in a video series of the Bigme B1051C. Maybe not the snazziest title, but there is a logic behind it. The B stands for Bigme, presumably. 10 is for the 10-inch device. This is actually a 10.3. The 51 is kind of the series of devices they've been releasing this year. This is the second one. The first one earlier in the year was the 751. And then the C just simply stands for color. So even though it's not the most memorable title, there is some logic behind it. We'll just call it the 1051 for the remainder of this series. Now in this series, in this video in particular, we're going to go over the unboxing of the hardware. We'll do kind of a little bit of a hardware review and those aspects. And then we'll move into the next video, which will be a visual tour, which will demonstrate all the things the device can do from a software perspective. That then leads into the third video, which is around the battery tests and other various features that are unique about the device. And then finally it culminates in a formal review of the pros and cons. Now, to put this device in a little bit of context, I think it's useful to compare it to its next closest competitor, which is Boox, and in particular, the Note Air 4C. So on the screen, I have the specifications of those two devices laid out, and you can see how they compare to each other. The areas that are highlighted in kind of a light green are advantages that one device has over the other. But honestly, from a hardware perspective, there isn't a huge gap between the two devices. There's pros on both sides. The major difference between these is, of course, the price point. And the 1051 is at a fairly significant premium pricing-wise versus the 4C, which is at $500. There's no question that the Note Air 4C is the better of the two devices. This series isn't really going to be debating whether that's the case or not. What this video series is going to do, though, is see to what extent has Bigme closed the gap between themselves and their closest rival. And that's opportunity is particularly present because the Note Air 4C did not significantly improve or change what we saw last year on the Note Air 3C. So the opportunity is there. So this series really will explore how well is Bigme starting to be more competitive with Boox, and is this device show a strong move in the direction of making Bigme more relevant than perhaps they've been in the past, at least in Western markets. So that's what I'll be looking out for, and we'll explore that through this video series. But right now, let's get right into the unboxing. So here is the box for the Bigme B1051 color. Kind of a different box we're used to. Normally you see a black box with some writing on it, but this is kind of white with a little bit of silver touch in terms of the logo, as well as the little indicator that's a 10.3 inch. Nothing much on the sides, but we do have on the back. You've got some QR codes, the WeChat app, their official website, and the WhatsApp. And then you've got a little bit of information here as well. You do have Bigme printed on the sides. I should point that out. And there's a sticker that indicates the device. But that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and take off the cellophane wrapping and let's see what's inside. Okay, the wrapping is off, and we'll just go ahead and slide out the two boxes. We'll start with the main box, and then there's a secondary box as well. The secondary box is going to be the cover, I would imagine. So there we go. And let's go ahead and get that out of there. Okay, and we'll open this up. And we've got a removable flap. This is similar to what we saw with the Boox Go 10.3, so Bigme is doing that as well. And then the inside, pretty straightforward. There's a little notch here, presumably for the camera. And kind of an interesting, this is different than what I've seen historically with Bigme. They had kind of a certain style for their covers. This is a little bit nicer. It's kind of a nice feel. It is a little plasticky, But the texture is good overall, and I think this will probably be a little easier to clean, I would imagine, than what Bigme had before. So my initial impressions are pretty optimistic. I wouldn't call it a premium cover, but it seems like a pretty good cover in general. Okay, let's go ahead and open up the device itself then, and there it is. I'll pull that out, and we've got a little stylus in here, like so. Ooh, that's a very interesting texture on the shaft of the stylus. This reminds me a little bit of the Remarkable Pro pen that came with the Remarkable 2, but might be a little bit grittier. So hopefully that's the case, because I did have issues with the Remarkable 2 pen where I would slide and I would have to kind of grip it tighter as a result of that. But this feels like it's a little tackier, which will be good. There is an eraser here at the tip, kind of this indentation near the top, which doesn't seem to have any type of purpose. But a nice little weight to the stylus, actually. I'll be interested to see what that weighs in at. Let's go ahead and pull out this box. Dump it all out. All right, so we've got our documentation, which of course we're going to get rid of, like so. Got a couple nibs here. All right, we've got some stickers for some strange reason, including a quality code sticker. Kind of interesting. Just leave that in there, I guess. And we have traditional USB to USB-C. This, I think, is a USB-A, if I remember correctly, to USB-C. So pretty good. Nice length, not too long. All right, very good. Okay, let's go ahead and take off this plastic wrap and see what the device feels like. Okay, there we go. Well, first off, the device does feel fairly thin. It's not the thinnest device out there, but it does have a nice thin feel to it. The edges are slightly rounded, but that seems to work out okay. You can tell one of the unique features of this device is it does have a speaker grill here on top. That's kind of unusual. Nothing on this side of the device, nothing on this side, except it looks like this is where the SD card is. And then here you have, looks like another speaker grill. You've got your fingerprint sensor here, that speaker grill. This is where the USB-C port connects. And then you've got a power indicator as well. And then you've got nothing here, but there's an interesting groove on the side of the device. I wonder if that's supposed to align. That's an interesting idea. So one of the issues with the Note Air 3 and 4C, for example, is they had nice rounded edges, which is great for holding the device, but it made the stylus kind of a little bit suspect in terms of the connection. So if you grab the device, the stylus would roll onto the screen because the connection wasn't quite strong enough and those curved edges. I think this is what this is designed to try to fix, and it seems pretty good. It seems pretty. It's not a hugely strong connection, but it is strong, and I think that might address that issue. So we'll test that. We'll test to see if it actually rolls over the device. In fact, let's go ahead and do that now. So let's lay out the cover, oops, like so. Get that to connect in there. There we go. And then we'll just go ahead and connect this. So if I grab it from the side, well, yeah, it's still, let's get this connected like that. Let me try grabbing it from the side. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it shifts a little bit, but it's not threatening to roll onto the screen like it did with the Note Air 3C. So that is an improved design. So that's a nice little touch on Bigme's part. Let's go ahead and look at the back of the device. And kind of an interesting design here, very reminiscent actually of the Note Air 3C and 4C, and that you've got this stripe here, this accent stripe, which is only on the back. It's not on the sides. And you've got the little Bigme logo there. Nice touch, actually. And then you've got your camera up here with the Bigme logo. You do have some pogo pins here, and these pins are designed for the keyboard case, which I don't have, but that's what those are there for. Okay, so I think overall, kind of my initial impressions of the hardware is it seems pretty decent. Okay, let's go ahead and do that weigh-in. And the manufacturer said this was 435 grams. But as we saw with the Note Air 4C, that was a little bit of a false advertising, not by a huge margin. I think the 4C ended up being about 20 grams heavier than indicated. Let's see how this device performs. So I'm getting 414. That's actually quite a bit less. This is going in the opposite direction, where the 4C was 420 grams, ended up measuring 440. This was 435, but it ends up measuring 414 grams. That's nice. That's a good surprise. Let's go ahead and put the stylus on there, and that's going to take it up to 430. So the stylus is roughly 16 grams. There's a little bit of a margin of error there. And let's go ahead and throw in the case, and our combined weight is 658. So that's lighter than the overall weight of the Note Air 4C, and the device itself is also lighter than its counterpart, the Note Air 4C. So a couple early wins for the Bigme device. Okay, very similar to the Go 10.3 from Boox, this device can be used as a stand, and we'll just connect the magnet here at the end, and then you can place it on the cover so you're getting a good angle, and then you can adjust that angle accordingly, which is really nice. And then if it needed to, if I hit this, it's not sliding, so it seems to be holding. See, there's a little bit sliding. So you can take your cover piece and put it there, and that would prevent it from sliding any further. So that's a nice stopper. So a good use of this particular piece. And you know, this type of adjustment is important because oftentimes with these e-ink screens, you'll get glare off of the screen. And a lot of times you just need a slight adjustment, like just going from this to this fixes the glare, or this to, you know, maybe like this. Just a slight change can get rid of that glare depending on your environment. So having a stand like this, which has a little more adjustability, is a good thing. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the startup and see what's involved. Okay, so let's go ahead and go in the setup process. I'm going to hold down the power button, and let's launch this thing for the first time. This is a standard screensaver that Bigme's been using, so that's just continues on this particular device. All right, so traditional, asking for your language. Here is their privacy policy, so I'll go ahead and scroll, and if you want to pause and read that, you can by pausing the video. Interesting that it starts with this. We haven't seen that on Boox devices. So kind of a nice touch. Okay, so we can either initialize settings or skip. Let's initialize settings, see what's involved with that. Okay, so here we have some gestures that we can select. We've got 3 swipes from the bottom. We've got side swipes. This is very similar to what we see with the Note Air. Let's go ahead and see what selections we have. So that's the first page of selections. And so there's one extra one. Okay, let's see how that compares to the others. Looks like it's about the same. Yeah, so it's same selections for these three. Very good. And it defaults to back, home screen, and full refresh. Let's go ahead and change this to multitasking switcher. All right, and then we can do these side gestures, and that's limited to your lighting and your volume. We'll go ahead and leave those off. And then we can go back by swiping in from either side, and there are no, as you can see, there's arrows for these that you can select different options. There's only the one option there. Let's move on. All right, we're going to go ahead and select a Wi-Fi network. I'm going to go ahead and put my password, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, just entered the password, and we're going and connecting now. And we are in. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. So here you can create an account with Bigme. I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. All right, and then we're going to go into a tutorial. And so that obviously takes you to the home page, pretty straightforward. Swipe down for the control center, that's pretty standard. Yep, we already talked about that. Okay, there is customization on this sidebar, so that's kind of neat. And in fact, you can determine what's on the sidebar and the spacing between items. So quite a bit of customization there. You can slide to scroll, that's what it's mentioning there. Okay, great. Pretty standard for the Bigme device. So you can scroll like so, or you can click on the arrows to move the device along. Let's go ahead and swipe down and see what we get. Okay, a number of settings. And we'll go over all of these in the visual tour, but basically we are here. Let's go ahead and look at storage and settings. Okay, here we go. So we have 100 gigabytes available out of 128. So that's a nice amount of storage available. The system's taking 28 gigabytes. I think the Note Air was taking more than that. So another nice little win for the Bigme. So I thought we'd just take a quick look at how the screen's performing, and we're going to do that versus the Note Air 4C as a comparator. And of course over here is our Bigme device. And as I look at the colors, they're very similar between the two. I should point out that both are on a regal mode, so presumably that's apples to apples. I do notice that the black and the green appear a little darker here, and then the text here appears a little darker than it appears here. So that's one thing that I can notice that's different. But the other thing I'm noticing is that you see a little more of a subtle gradient change in the colors over here than you see in the colors over here. Let's take magenta as an example. So the first three bars of magenta are pretty much the same, and then it starts to fade like so. And here you can see the fading right away. Each cell is a little bit different. You'll also notice that at the end, these shaded cells are a little bit darker than the ones over here. So you definitely see some differences between the two. I think the thing that really sticks out to me mostly, though, is the blacks appear a little bit darker. Let's go ahead and, on the 4C that is, let's go ahead and switch these around just to see if the light is having any impact on what we're seeing. And I don't think it is. The same differences. The screen still, for example, looks lighter than this screen, although now the blacks look a little closer to me, so maybe the lighting had a little bit of an effect on that. Let's take a look at what the front lighting does to each of these devices. Okay, so now both devices have front lighting on, and I think that the 4C is a little bit brighter. It's giving me a little more of a white color to the background, where this one is just a little bit muted and maybe not quite as bright. Let's go ahead and put on warm lighting to see what that looks like between these two. And their sliders work a little bit differently. Refresh the screen. So yes, you definitely see a brighter light on the 4C and a little bit of a weaker light and not quite as bold in its color on the Bigme device. Now, one of the downers, as it turns out, with the 4C device was that this light intensity comes at a price on the battery life. So presumably, if the Bigme can show better battery life as a result of not being as bright, that might be a trade-off that's willing to be made. Okay, so the one last hardware check I'm going to kind of make at this point is just to see how scratchy the screen sounds. So I'm going to go ahead and move this device to the microphone, do a little scratchiness, and see how that sounds. Okay, so I got a little bit of a light scratchy sound, but it's definitely not particularly overstated. I would call it slightly better than writing on a glass screen. But it's definitely a subtle sound. It's not nearly as pronounced as, say, on a device like the 4C. But it's okay. It's not too bad. I wanted to make one correction of something said earlier in the video, and that's on this top bar, which I called kind of a speaker grill, and there is a speaker grill design. Of course, most of it's faux, it's just filled in dots. But there are some holes in this grill, but it's not for speakers, which are located on top of the device. It's actually for a 4-part microphone array. So these are actually microphones, and the speaker is just here on top. I thought we'd also go ahead and take a listen and compare that to the Note Air 4C. So we're going to start by playing a familiar video and seeing how that sounds. I'm going to put it right up to the mic.
Hey there! Welcome to the third part in my series on the newly released Note Air 4C. In this particular video, we're going to start to move more into the review of the device.
That's enough of that. Let's then go ahead and listen to that same video using the speakers on the Note Air 4C.
Hey there! Welcome to the third part in my series on the newly released Note Air 4C. In this particular video, we're going to start to move more into the review.
Okay, both devices were set to roughly 50% of volume. The Note Air 4C came across a little bit louder. They also had a little bit of a different sound. I haven't had a chance to kind of listen to these enough to know which set of speakers I prefer. There are two sets of speakers in the Note Air 4C, where the 1051 only has the one set of one speaker. I will say in general, I'm leaning toward the Note Air 4C, but overall they're perfectly fine. I don't generally use speakers on my devices, so I'm just looking for it to be able to play some audio at a relatively decent level, and both devices seem to do that. But if I end up having a preference on the two, I'll go ahead and mention that later in this video series. Okay, so that does our unboxing video. The next video will be the visual tour, and we'll go over all the software features of the 1051. I just want to make two more observations before we close this particular video out. The first observation was kind of by surprise. There was no firmware update for the 1051. That's unusual. Almost every device I review, I unbox it, even though I'm unboxing it shortly after its release, there's always at least one, sometimes even two, firmware updates. So this one, not having one, is unusual. It's neither a good nor a bad thing. I can actually say from a personal basis, I kind of prefer that, because a lot of times when I'm doing my unboxing review, I'm filming, getting momentum, and then all of a sudden I'm stopped cold as waiting for a device to update, sometimes 20, 30, 40, or even more minutes. So it's kind of refreshing not to have to go through that. But in terms of the device itself, it doesn't really carry any particular meaning. So that's just one point I wanted to make. The other point I wanted to make is I just wanted to reinforce why I believe the 1051 is not going to be competitive
against the Note Air 4C. And I'll just give this one anecdotal example. There is literally no search functionality within the note-taking app. Well, there's one small ability to search on titles of notebooks, but within a notebook there's no search functionality, and there's certainly nothing like tags or what have you. That's really unusual. Obviously you've got tags with Remarkable and Viwoods, but Supernote and Boox has a lot of sophisticated search functionality, and it's just completely absent here. Now, that's not the entirety of why I think the 1051 will ultimately be an inferior device, but it's a huge one, and it symbolizes, I think, that massive gap between Bigme and Boox. So, again, the question isn't so much which will be the better device. The question is, to what degree does the 1051 bridge the gap versus past Bigme devices? And we'll start to explore that in the remaining videos of the series. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope to see you there. Until then, see you next time.